Good evening. I'm here with Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, who's making a run for the presidential nomination for the Democrat Party.
Yes.
And
aloha.
Aloha. And Congresswoman Gabbard has been doing, I think, a stellar job of getting attention, especially around New Hampshire and southern New Hampshire.
We're grateful to be here and really enjoying and appreciating the opportunity to get across the state. We're holding town halls. We're walking through Main Street in big and small towns and getting to hear from small business owners and people actually seeing and listening to what's on their minds and being able to connect directly. It's been amazing.
That's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to listening to your town hall afterwards. So I want to start out by saying thank you for your service. Not everybody serves. You chose to serve. You went to some hot zones even.
Yes.
What prompted you to get into the Army? Was it the Army you joined initially?
Yeah. I look like a lot of Americans across this country after the attacks on 9/11. I was motivated to enlist in the military, to do all that I could to go after and defeat those terrorists who attacked us on that day. I have been serving now in the Army National Guard for nearly 17 years.
That's a long
deployed
time.
twice to the Middle East. It is. This time has flown by quickly. But have just experienced and seen firsthand the terribly high human cost of war, and have taken those experiences with me throughout my 7 years serving in Congress, focused on my work in the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Homeland Security Committees, really gathering this experience and understanding in foreign policy and national security.
Right. Well, you probably know there's a difference between conservatives and what we call neocons. I think we can all agree, except for maybe the military-industrial complex, that fewer foreign engagements are a good thing.
Yeah.
What is your opinion, however, on maintaining selected overseas bases and a strong naval presence to protect shipping lanes and to be able to respond if we or an ally are attacked?
Look, I think that we need to assess where our troops are deployed, where they are stationed overseas, and whether those bases or those stationings actually serve the best national security interests of the United States. Unfortunately, we see in places like Afghanistan, for example, where we continue to have thousands of American troops based for an indefinite period of time when they really don't need to be there. We should bring our troops home from Afghanistan, stop spending $4 billion a month there, bring those dollars back here at home, and recognize that if there is a resurgence of Al-Qaeda cells in Afghanistan, for example, we can quickly deploy special force teams to root out and defeat that threat and then quickly exit. There's a smarter way for us to be able to make sure that we are keeping the American people safe than thinking, as many of the neocons and neolibs in Washington do, that we have to deploy our troops in countries all around the world to quote-unquote prevent another 9/11 style attack. This is not strategic thinking. No. It's not focused on what our objective really is, which is how can we best use our military in an effective way to keep us safe.
Right. I mean, you're not in favor of severely reducing the military, just reducing our forward projection.
Right. Actually, honoring the service and sacrifice of my brothers and sisters in uniform by sending them on missions that are truly worthy of their sacrifice, and maintaining their readiness and their strength by focusing on that mission of service and defending and protecting our country.
That all sounds very reasonable. And I'm sure if we got into the details, we might find points of disagreement. But I'm in favor of less overseas bases and entanglements. But you have to be ready, otherwise people won't fear you and they will attack.
Yeah. Well, look, I am not a pacifist. I'm a realist. And as Commander-in-Chief, I will end these long-standing regime change wars and nation-building missions, work to end this new Cold War and nuclear arms race that we are in, and redirect our taxpayer dollars actually towards serving the needs of the people in our communities here at home.
Yeah. Peace dividends tend to be a bit elusive, I must say. And when you say reduce the nuclear or scale back the nuclear arms race, you can't be naked without them if the bad guys have them. So, what do you think is a reasonable balance there?
It's providing the kind of leadership necessary to do two immediate things. Number one is meeting with leaders of other countries like Russia and China and North Korea, working to de-escalate tensions, to negotiate, in some cases renegotiate treaties or negotiate new treaties that can build upon the progress made by presidents of the past like Reagan and Gorbachev. These nuclear arms races cannot be won, and it requires strong leadership to be able to de-escalate these tensions and work towards the goal of reducing the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the world, to make it so that no one here in our country has to go through what we in my home state of Hawaii went through last year when we had that nuclear missile scare, thinking that there was an attack coming in from North Korea. We got an alert across every phone in the state saying seek immediate shelter, and this is not a drill, there's a missile incoming, and thinking that there's just minutes to live. And
it turned out that somebody had pushed the wrong button, but it was
the fact is that the threat is real, and that's why we reacted the way that we did. This is a serious existential threat that must be addressed. It is,
and North Korea is one of the toughest challenges. Presidents of both parties have tried various methods, and we're still trying to find the right way. So, I'd take my hat off if you succeeded. So I've been listening to you in debates, and you come across as the reasonable person in the room, and a more measured view of a lot of the issues. It's also clear you've been involved in sponsoring and debating many of the bills on the topics. Why do you think the party is not treating you more as a serious contender?
Look, I am a candidate who is fighting for the people. Fighting working to bring about a government that is of, by, and for the people, and calling for serious reforms within our government and even within our party that ensures that it is the interests of the people that come to the forefront. Unfortunately, Washington has become a place that is controlled by the powerful elite rather than a place that is centered around this governance that Abraham Lincoln envisioned for our country.
And the people before him, the founders.
Exactly.
And I would think you'll find people on both parties that would agree that we don't want the country to be run by and for the powerful elite. Yes. We may have a slightly different vision of how we get away from there.
Which is okay.
I think we agree on what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Would you consider running as an independent? Or
no.
I think one of your advisors told me this morning that, or your staff members, that you are hoping to influence the direction of the party.
That's right. Yeah, I will. I've been asked this probably 100 times by now. I won't be running as a third-party candidate. I'm running to be the Democratic nominee to really bring my party back to its roots, back to its foundation of. Where I think the soul of the party lies, which is in being the voice for the voiceless and really fighting for the people, not for special interests or corporations, but fighting for the people.
And for the people, and that's important. Left-wing parties around the world have, I think, lost their bearings in a number of places, and the people feel they're not as well represented as they should have been.
I agree with that. Across party lines, you have that disenchantment and frustration that our political system has left we the people behind.
You didn't get Donald Trump by accident, and to win back those hearts and minds is going to take a different kind of candidate.
That's right. I am that candidate.
We shall see. This promises to be interesting. I also read your position on Medicare for All. Now that's much debated, is much mentioned in the debates, usually with a lot of fudging on the costs, but what you said was different from the others. Most of your competitors are talking about wiping out private insurance altogether and just having one plan for everybody. You specifically stated that you see a space for private insurance plans or supplement plans in order to let the market help out the healthcare.
It's really to make sure that people have a choice. People have the freedom to make the choices for themselves and their families. I think what's most important is that we root out the crony capitalism that exists within our healthcare system now big insurance and big pharma are profiting off the backs of sick people. And we do so by making sure we have guaranteed health care for all, while still maintaining the right and choice for those who want to either purchase their own insurance or they have an employer who's offering it, to be able to maintain that if they so choose. This is nothing new. There are other countries that have a similar system in place that's working very well. They're able to spend less per capita for that health care than we currently do in this country and receive better outcomes.
Sure. The places that have gone furthest towards all government healthcare tend to have poorer outcomes and longer wait times. You need, I think, a mix in order for it to be efficient.
Really, in my research, just looking at every really developed country in the world that has some form of universal healthcare or another, there's not a single one that has absolutely zero private insurance whatsoever. So those who are proposing that here really would be breaking new ground that's never been tested before.
And I'm more in favor of free markets altogether, because I actually think the crony government in this is distorting the market. But I appreciate that your position is significantly different than the others, and I think stands a better chance of working.
I agree.
Have you considered the costing of this and how it would be balanced within the overall federal budget?
Yes, I think the reality is that we are paying far more for this health insurance and this health coverage that is still leaving far too many people who are insured, underinsured. They can't afford the high deductibles. They still can't afford their medicine. I just spoke with a woman last night in Amherst who talked about her daughter who has cystic fibrosis. And she's grateful there's a brand new medicine that came out, but it costs something like $200,000. And so she's crowdfunding in her own community to try to raise the money to get this medicine for her daughter. These are the kinds of things that, yes, we need to help promote and support new technology and innovation. But she talked about, she's from Ireland originally, that she could go back to Ireland and get that very same medicine for 1/10 of the price. So this is what I'm talking about when here at home we have families in the most wealthy nation in the world who are really struggling just to get the basic level of care for their families. And I think that's really what needs to be fixed.
Well, there's one piece of regulation I think you might want to consider unwinding, and that is that the FDA, in many cases, greatly delays the arrival on the market of new drugs that would help in some of these unusual cases. And there's been a movement, I think, more towards the libertarian side of having the FDA be a little more hands-off. There's one thing analyzing and regulating and making reports. There's another thing saying to people, you can't have this even if you're willing to risk it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And there's been legislation in Congress that I've supported that would make it so that these medicines are more accessible to people. Obviously, making sure that there's system in place for them to report if there are any serious problems or issues, but people should be able to make those choices for themselves.
Okay, super. I see we're getting a little close to 6 o'clock, so I'm going to throw one more out if I may, and then I'll wind up and let you go make the people happy, and if your staff are happy, I'll go take up a place at the back. You've taken a strong position on individual rights, and you're also much more subtle on gun regulations than, for example, Beto. What do you have in mind for common sense regulations or checks, and do you support red flag laws? And if so, do you worry about due process violations?
Yeah. Look, I think some of the sensible gun safety laws that I think should be in place are ones that we've passed through the House this year. Things like actually truly universal background checks, closing the Charleston loophole, legislation introduced by Congressman Jim Clyburn from South Carolina. Bump stocks, I think, makes sense, and I've heard from some of my Republican colleagues, of course, those should not be out on the market. Red flag laws, I think in concept I do support, but ensuring that there is clear due process in place, so it's not something that can be abused.
No, it can't. It's not something that can be rushed because it feels good.
Right. Well, like most pieces of legislation, I think we've got to do, the no-fly list, for example. I think that's another one where it makes sense to make sure that terrorists who are on a no-fly list cannot walk in and buy a firearm. But I also know that there are serious problems with the no-fly list, where if you or I were put on that list, A, we would never know about it, B, we'd never know how we could challenge it or take our names off, or what evidence was put in place to get there.
And there you come to the point where the conservatives and libertarians are very scared of any kind of universal record, any kind of tying of things to the no-fly list until it can be challenged, and are worried that red flag laws are a gateway for the wrong people, the same kind of people that would call down a swatting, if you've ever seen what that is, where your enemy calls the police, pretends to be a battered spouse, and the next thing you know, your front door's knocked down by armed police, heavily armed police.
I get it. I think when it comes right down to it, we as a society, I think largely share the same goals, which is to do what we can to make sure that our communities are safe, that our kids are safe when they're going to school, that living in fear of a mass shooting is not the new reality that we have to accept. This goal should not, and I believe does not, conflict with upholding our Second Amendment rights, and nor is there any one single bill or action that can be taken that will snap our fingers and be the answer to this. So I think how we get there is doing what's not being done now, which is having the kinds of dialogue and conversation in our communities where people can let their concerns be heard and try to increase better understanding with more diverse perspectives about both the problems that communities face, that here in New Hampshire is very different than Chicago, is very different than Hawaii.
It absolutely is.
And getting to this place of understanding is how we have to be able to move forward.
I'm getting the hook, so I'm going to wind this up.
It's great talking
Congressman
to you, Mike.
and hopefully President Gabbard,
thank you.
I thank you so much for the interview. Our readers will certainly be fascinated, and I'll come in and listen to your town hall.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Grok TV.